The silence of space was absolute, a heavy, unyielding stillness that wrapped itself around Alex's ship as it drifted, powerless, through the void. Lights blinked in a frantic dance across the cockpit, warning of failures he was already painfully aware of. The thrusters were dead, the communication systems were down, and the oxygen supply was rapidly dwindling. He was alone, a speck of life on the verge of extinguishing in the cold darkness of the universe. Sweat beaded on Alex's brow as his fingers danced over the controls, trying to re-route power to the engines. His breathing was shallow, heart pounding in his chest. He was supposed to be the best chosen for this mission because of his unflinching calm under pressure, his scientific brilliance, and his impeccable problem-solving skills. But now, staring at the flashing red lights, all of that seemed to slip away. The ship shuddered violently, and Alex's stomach lurched as he was thrown against the seat straps. With a grimace, he looked out of the front window and saw a planet looming large in the distance, its surface a swirling mixture of blue and green, dotted with strange, glittering lights. Arendor. He hadn't intended to land here. It was an uncharted planet, somewhere in the far reaches of the galaxy, marked only as a potential for future exploration. His mission had been to catalog distant star systems, not make first contact. The ship gave another sickening jolt, and Alex realized he didn't have a choice. He needed to land now or risk being lost forever. Hands shaking but steady with purpose, he activated what little emergency power remained, setting a course for the planet's atmosphere. The ship groaned as it was pulled into Arendor's gravity, and Alex braced himself for impact. The descent was a blur of flames and chaos. The ship's hull screamed as it tore through the atmosphere, the friction turning the sky outside his window into a hellish inferno of orange and red. Alarms blared, metal groaned, and Alex's vision blurred as the G-forces pressed him into his seat. His world narrowed to the singular task of survival. Get through this, find a way to land safely, and figure out the rest later. The ship hit the planet's surface with a bone-jarring crash, skidding across the ground before finally coming to a halt. For a moment, everything was still. The only sound was the ragged rasp of Alex's breathing. He unclipped his restraints with trembling hands and pulled himself up, wincing as pain shot through his body. His muscles ached from the force of the landing, but nothing seemed broken. The cockpit was a mess of shattered screens, sparking wires, and smoke. Through the cracked viewport, Alex could see the planet's surface lush, vibrant, and strange. Giant trees with silver bark towered in the distance, their leaves shimmering with an ethereal glow. The ground was covered in soft, moss-like vegetation that radiated faint light, illuminating the surroundings with a ghostly hue. Above, 2 suns hung in the sky, casting long shadows across the land. Arendor was beautiful in an otherworldly, untamed way, but the beauty was lost on Alex as he stumbled out of the wreckage of his ship. His mind was focused solely on survival. He needed to assess the damage, gather supplies, and figure out if there was any way to repair the ship or send a distress signal. It would be days, weeks, or even months before anyone noticed he was missing. He couldn't afford to wait for rescue. As he limped around the ship, inspecting the damage, he quickly realized the situation was dire. The communications array was shattered, the hull was breached in multiple places, and the power systems were fried. Without advanced tools and resources, repairing the ship would be impossible. A wave of helplessness washed over him, but he pushed it aside. He couldn't afford to panic, not yet. Suddenly a movement caught his eye. Alex froze, his gaze snapping toward the tree line. At first he thought it was a trick of the light, but then he saw it again, shadows moving swiftly between the trees, too fast to be an animal. His heart pounded in his chest as he realized he was not alone. Before he could react, figures emerged from the forest, tall, lithe, and unmistakably humanoid. They moved with the grace of predators, fanning out to surround him. Alex's breath caught in his throat as he took in their appearance. They were women, or at least they appeared to be. Their skin was a pale, almost metallic hue, shimmering faintly in the sunlight. Their hair, long and flowing, was a deep shade of blue, and their eyes glowed with a sharp, unearthly light. Each of them was armed, holding strange, curved weapons that looked both elegant and deadly. Their expressions were cold, unreadable, as they silently advanced toward him. Alex's mind raced. He hadn't prepared for first contact with an alien species. He didn't know their language, their customs, or even if they were friendly, but the way they moved, the way they held their weapons, suggested that they didn't intend to welcome him with open arms. Instinctively, Alex raised his hands, palms out, in what he hoped was a universal gesture of surrender. "I'm not here to hurt anyone," he called out, his voice hoarse. "I'm just a scientist. My ship crashed. I—" Before he could finish, one of the women raised her hand, and a pulse of energy shot from a device on her wrist, hitting Alex squarely in the chest. Pain exploded through his body, and he collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath. His limbs felt heavy, unresponsive, as if they were made of lead. Two of the women approached him cautiously, binding his wrists and ankles with a strange, glowing cord. Alex struggled weakly against the restraints, but it was no use. Whatever they had hit him with had sapped his strength completely. His vision blurred, and the last thing he saw before darkness overtook him was the cold, emotionless face of his captors. Alex woke to the sound of murmured voices and the hum of unfamiliar machinery. His body ached, but the pain was dulled, distant, as if his senses were wrapped in a thick fog. He tried to move, but his limbs were still bound, and a heavy weight pressed down on his chest. Blinking against the harsh light, he struggled to focus on his surroundings. He was inside a large, circular chamber, the walls made of a smooth, metallic material that gleamed faintly in the light. Strange symbols and markings decorated the surface, none of which he could decipher. The room was filled with advanced technology monitors, glowing panels, and floating holographic displays that pulsed with information. And then he saw them. The women his captors stood at the far end of the room, speaking in low, melodic tones. Their language was unlike anything he had ever heard, a mixture of sounds that seemed to resonate with the air itself. But it wasn't just their language that intrigued him. These women were clearly intelligent, highly advanced, and yet there was something primal, almost warrior-like, in the way they carried themselves. Before Alex could try to call out, the women parted, and a new figure stepped forward. She was taller than the others, her presence commanding the room. Her silver skin shimmered under the light, and her hair, a cascade of dark blue, flowed down her back like water. She wore a crown delicate, yet regal set with glowing stones that radiated power. Her eyes, a piercing shade of violet, locked onto Alex with an intensity that made his heart skip a beat. This had to be their leader. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice sharp, though perfectly understandable. It was clear that she could speak his language, though her accent was heavy, alien. "Why have you come to Arendor?" Alex swallowed, his throat dry. "My name is Alex. I'm a scientist from Earth. My ship malfunctioned. I didn't mean to land here. I was just trying to survive." The woman's eyes narrowed, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Earth," she repeated, as if testing the word on her tongue. "You are the first male to set foot on this planet in centuries, and yet you expect us to believe you are here by accident." The weight of her words hit Alex like a physical blow. He had no idea what he had stumbled into, but it was clear that his presence was more than an inconvenience to these people. It was an affront. "I don't know your history," Alex said, carefully sensing the tension in the air. "But I mean no harm. If you let me, I'll repair my ship and leave. I don't want to disrupt your world." The woman laughed. A cold, bitter sound. "Disrupt," she echoed. "You have already disrupted much more than you realize." She stepped closer, towering over him, her eyes burning with both curiosity and disdain. "I am Queen Ilara, ruler of Arendor. It was I who banished men from this world, after they nearly destroyed it. We have built a society of peace, free from the violence and chaos that men bring. And now you, a man, have crashed into our lives, bringing with you the threat of the past." Alex's mind raced. A planet without men? Banished? It was almost impossible to comprehend. But as he looked into the Queen's eyes, he saw something more than just anger. He saw fear. Fear of what his presence might mean. "Please," Alex said, his voice soft but steady. "I'm not here to harm anyone. I'm just a scientist. Let me prove that to you." Queen Ilara studied him for a long moment, her gaze piercing. Then, with a flick of her wrist, she signaled to the guards, "Take him away. We will decide his fate soon enough." As Alex was dragged from the chamber, his mind whirled with questions. What had happened on this planet to make them fear men so deeply? And more importantly, how was he going to survive in a world where he was seen as the enemy? Alex awoke to the soft hum of unfamiliar machinery, a faint metallic scent hanging in the air. His body ached from the rough treatment of his captors, but as his senses slowly sharpened, he realized the restraints on his wrists and ankles were gone. He blinked against the harsh light above, trying to get his bearings. The room was small and Spartan, made entirely of sleek metal and glass, bathed in a cool blue glow. One wall was transparent, offering a view into a larger chamber filled with strange devices, many of which emitted faint pulses of energy or hovered in midair. It was a place of science, technology, things he understood. But that was the only familiar aspect of his situation. The rest of it, the culture, the people, and the power structure was alien in the truest sense of the word. The women of Arendor were wary of him, and perhaps rightly so. But he wasn't a threat. He wasn't like the men they feared from their history. Yet, convincing them of that would be his greatest challenge. The door slid open with a soft hiss, and Alex tensed as one of the guards entered. She was tall, with the same pale, metallic skin and cold expression as the others. Without a word, she gestured for him to follow. Alex hesitated, then rose to his feet, wincing as his muscles protested the movement. He followed her out into the corridor, his mind racing. The corridor was narrow, its walls lined with glowing blue symbols that pulsed in a rhythmic pattern. It reminded Alex of some kind of energy grid, though the technology was far beyond anything he had encountered back on Earth. He marveled at the subtle elegance of it. There was power here, hidden beneath the surface, and yet everything about this place felt cold, detached. They walked in silence for what felt like an eternity, the sound of their footsteps echoing off the smooth metal floor. Eventually, the corridor opened up into a vast, circular chamber. At the center stood a raised platform surrounded by floating holograms, each one displaying complex diagrams and data that Alex couldn't immediately decipher. The room buzzed with energy, a constant hum that seemed to vibrate in his bones. Standing at the center of the platform was Queen Alara, her tall figure bathed in the soft glow of the holographic displays. Her long, dark blue hair shimmered under the light, cascading down her back in waves. She looked every bit as regal and commanding as she had during their first meeting, her violet eyes sharp as they turned toward him. Beside her stood another woman, younger, with sharper features and a more rebellious air. She wore a slim-fitting jumpsuit adorned with strange symbols, and her eyes gleamed with curiosity as she studied Alex. He could feel the weight of her gaze, the intensity of her interest in him, and it was clear she wasn't like the others. There was something about her, a spark of defiance, of questioning. "Zara," Queen Alara said, her voice cutting through the air, "has convinced me to give you a chance to prove yourself." Her tone was clipped, as if she was already regretting the decision. Zara stepped forward, her eyes locked on Alex's. "You're a scientist, aren't you? You understand technology." Her voice was sharp, but not unkind. It was the voice of someone who sought answers, not conflict. Alex nodded cautiously. "Yes, I was trained in multiple fields: engineering, astrophysics, artificial intelligence. I can help, if that's what you want." Zara smiled faintly, a flicker of amusement in her eyes. "I believe you can." Alara's gaze narrowed, her regal posture stiffening. "Do not mistake this for leniency, Alex of Earth. You are still a threat, a disruption to the order we have built here on Arendor. But Zara tells me you may be of use to us. Our technology has stagnated, our energy systems are failing, and we need a solution." Alex's heart quickened. He hadn't expected this. They needed his help. But even as hope flickered within him, he understood the risk. They didn't trust him, and any misstep could mean his death. "I can help with that," Alex said slowly, choosing his words carefully. "But I'll need access to your systems, your technology. I'll need to understand how things work here." Zara's smile widened slightly. "That can be arranged." Alara's expression remained unreadable. "You will be under constant surveillance. If you step out of line, if you even hint at causing harm to my people, I will have you executed." Alex swallowed hard, nodding. "Understood." Zara motioned for him to follow, and they left the chamber, stepping into a long hallway lined with transparent walls that offered glimpses of other parts of the sprawling complex. As they walked, Zara glanced at him from the corner of her eye. "Don't mind Alara," she said in a low voice. "She's cautious, protective. But she's not unreasonable." Alex raised an eyebrow. "She seems pretty set on seeing me as a threat." Zara chuckled, the sound low and warm. "She is. But she listens to reason, and more importantly, she listens to me." They entered a smaller room filled with advanced machinery, computers, data terminals, and devices that Alex couldn't even begin to identify. Zara gestured to the central console, which was alive with pulsing symbols and streams of data. This is the heart of our energy grid, she explained, her fingers flying over the console as she pulled up various schematics and readouts. Our power systems are failing. We've tried everything to stabilize them, but nothing works. If we can't fix this, we'll lose our infrastructure. Everything we've built will collapse. Alex leaned forward, studying the holographic displays with growing interest. The technology was unlike anything he had ever seen, but there were enough familiar elements that he could make sense of it. Energy conduits, power cells, distribution nodes, it all followed basic principles of physics, though on a far more advanced scale. I see the problem, he murmured, his eyes scanning the data. You're running a closed-loop system. It's efficient. But over time, the energy loss from the feedback loops creates instability. You need an external source to stabilize the flow. Zara nodded, impressed. That's what I thought. But we don't have the resources to harness an external power source. Erindor is limited. Alex thought for a moment, his mind racing. What about solar energy? You have 2 suns, right? If we could develop a system to tap into that. Zara's eyes lit up. I've considered that, but the technology to capture and convert that amount of energy is beyond our current capabilities. That's where you come in. Alex smiled faintly. Then let's get to work. For the next several days, Alex worked alongside Zara, poring over schematics and diagrams, running simulations, and brainstorming potential solutions. Their collaboration was tense at first, with Zara keeping her distance, wary of him despite her curiosity. But as they spent more time together, discussing theories and sharing ideas, a mutual respect began to grow. Zara was brilliant. Her understanding of Erindor's technology was unparalleled, and she had a sharp mind for innovation. Alex found himself impressed by her quick thinking and adaptability. She wasn't just a scientist, she was an inventor, constantly pushing the boundaries of what was possible. And yet, there was a restlessness in her, a dissatisfaction with the limits imposed by her society. As they worked, they exchanged stories. Alex told her about Earth, about its diverse cultures, technological advancements, and the challenges his people faced. Zara listened intently, her curiosity piqued. In return, she told him about Erindor, about the Great Banishment, when men were driven from the planet after years of violence and oppression. She spoke of how Queen Elara had risen to power, leading the women of Erindor into a new era of peace and progress, free from the chaos that men had brought. They were warriors, Zara explained one evening, her voice low, the men of the past, aggressive, destructive. They believed strength came from domination, from control. When Elara banished them, she created a society built on collaboration, on harmony. We've thrived since then. Alex nodded slowly, understanding the depth of their fear. But you've also isolated yourselves, he said gently. You've cut yourselves off from half of the population. There's potential in balance, in cooperation between men and women. Zara's expression hardened for a moment, then softened, perhaps. But that's not how it's seen here. You're the first man we've encountered in centuries, Alex. Your presence alone is a threat to everything we've built. I don't want to be a threat, Alex said quietly. I just want to help. Zara met his gaze, her eyes searching his. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then she smiled, a small, tentative smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I believe you. Despite their growing rapport, Alex's presence did not go unnoticed. The other women of Erindor remained suspicious of him, their cold stares following him whenever he moved through the halls. Whispers circulated, fueled by fear and mistrust. To them, Alex was an anomaly, an invader who threatened the delicate balance of their society. Zara, however, seemed unconcerned by the scrutiny. She continued to work with Alex, pushing him to solve the energy crisis that loomed over their civilization. They spent long hours together, sometimes late into the night, bouncing ideas off each other, testing theories and refining their designs. One evening, as they stood before a holographic model of their proposed solar energy system, Zara turned to Alex with a rare, unguarded look in her eyes. You've done more than just help us. You know, she said quietly, you've shown me that maybe there's more to men than what our history tells us. Alex's heart skipped a beat. Zara, I'm not. I know, she interrupted, her voice firm but soft. You're different. I see that now. And maybe others will too. But not everyone shared Zara's growing acceptance of Alex. The traditionalists, led by Neres, one of Elara's closest advisors, began to voice their concerns more openly. Neris was a staunch believer in the old ways, in the purity of a female-only society. She viewed Alex's presence as a dangerous contamination, a crack in the foundation of Arendor's hard-earned peace. "You're playing with fire," Zara Neris warned during a tense meeting with Elara. "This man cannot be trusted. No man can. He may seem harmless now, but that's how it starts. He'll worm his way into our trust, and then chaos." Zara's jaw tightened, but she kept her voice steady. "He's proven himself valuable. We're making progress on the energy grid, something we couldn't do before." Neris scoffed. "At what cost? Your progress is not worth the risk of upending everything we've built." Elara, who had been listening in silence, finally spoke. "Zara is right. Alex has been useful to us. But Neris is also right. We cannot afford to be complacent. We must remain vigilant." Her gaze flickered to Zara, then back to the rest of the council. "I will allow Alex to continue his work, under strict supervision. But we must tread carefully. His presence here is not without consequence." The tension within Arendor continued to simmer, a fragile equilibrium that could tip at any moment. Alex knew that, despite the progress they had made, he was still walking a fine line. One misstep, one mistake, and everything could unravel. But as he and Zara continued their work, their bond grew stronger. She challenged him, pushed him to think in new ways, and in return he opened her mind to possibilities she hadn't considered before. They were, in many ways, two sides of the same coin, both searching for something more, something beyond the limitations of their respective worlds. One evening, as they stood on the balcony of the research facility, overlooking the vast alien landscape of Arendor, Zara turned to him, her expression thoughtful. "I never thought I'd say this," she began softly, "but maybe you're not just here to fix our technology. Maybe you're here to show us something we've been missing all along." Alex smiled faintly, his heart full of uncertainty yet hope. "Or maybe we're just here to learn from each other." Zara's eyes met his, and for a brief moment, the weight of the world around them seemed to fade, leaving only the two of them and the endless horizon of possibility stretching out before them. The days on Arendor were long and bright, both of the planet's suns casting overlapping rays of golden light across its vibrant landscapes. The endless forest shimmered in hues of silver and emerald, and the ground seemed to pulse faintly with the energy of a world that felt alive beneath Alex's feet. But despite its beauty, the planet was a silent, unforgiving sentinel, always reminding Alex that he was an outsider in a society that neither trusted nor understood him. Weeks had passed since Alex's ship had crash-landed on this strange planet, and though he had worked tirelessly with Zara to develop a solution to the energy crisis, the hostility of the Arendorian people still pressed down on him like a weight he couldn't shake. Everywhere he went, eyes followed him, cold, cautious, and unblinking. Whispers would start the moment he passed, and no matter how hard he tried to keep his head down and focus on the work, he could feel the tension in the air, like a storm building on the horizon. Yet, despite the heavy atmosphere of mistrust, there was a growing current of something else beneath it all, something subtle but undeniable. His contributions to the energy project had not gone unnoticed, and his interactions with Zara, and more recently with a few of the other women he had worked with, had started to plant seeds of doubt in their long-held beliefs. For the first time in centuries, the women of Arendor were faced with the reality of a man who was not a monster from their ancient history, but a man of intelligence, empathy, and kindness. And though the progress was slow, Alex could sense the cracks forming in the walls that had been built to keep men in their perceived danger out. It was late one evening when Zara came to find Alex in the research facility. The suns had set, casting long shadows through the wide windows that overlooked the gleaming landscape outside. The room hummed with the quiet energy of machines running diagnostics on the solar energy project they had been working on. Holographic displays floated above the workstations, filled with equations, schematics, and data streams that flickered in the dim light. Alex sat hunched over a console, his brow furrowed as he worked on calibrating a new energy conduit system they had designed earlier that day. His mind buzzed with ideas and calculations, but it was the constant undercurrent of tension from the world outside that gnawed at him most. "You're working too hard," Zara's voice came from the doorway, soft but with a trace of amusement. Alex looked up, blinking in surprise. He hadn't heard her come in, but there she was, leaning against the doorframe, her arms crossed casually over her chest. The cool detachment she had once worn like armor was gone, replaced by something warmer, more familiar. Over the weeks, their collaboration had deepened into a genuine friendship, one built on shared goals, late-night conversations, and a growing understanding of one another. "Just trying to make sure we don't blow out the entire grid when we switch this thing on," Alex replied with a weary smile. He ran a hand through his hair, glancing at the schematic hovering in the air before him. "I'm close, though. Another couple of adjustments, and we might finally be able to stabilize the power flow." Zara moved closer, her gaze shifting to the display. "You've done more than just stabilize it, Alex. You've revolutionized it. We've been stuck in the same technological loop for decades, and in a matter of weeks, you've helped us take a leap we didn't think was possible." Alex shrugged, his modesty genuine. "I've just been applying principles that already existed. You had the tools, you just needed a different perspective." Zara's eyes lingered on him for a moment, her expression unreadable. "Maybe that's true for more than just technology," she said quietly. Alex met her gaze, feeling the weight of her words. He had sensed it before, an unspoken connection between them, one that went beyond their work. Zara was different from the others, and it wasn't just her intellect that set her apart. She questioned things, she saw possibilities where others only saw barriers, and as much as she tried to maintain a professional distance, Alex could feel the walls between them slowly eroding. "I hope so," Alex said softly. "I'm not here to cause trouble, Zara. I know some of the others think I am, but I want to help. I want to help. I want to show them that I'm not like the men from your past." Zara nodded, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. "You've already shown me that," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "But this society, it's built on fear, Alex. Fear of what men could do, what they once did. It's ingrained in us, in our laws, our culture. Even Elara, as open-minded as she is, has lived her whole life with that fear." Alex sighed, leaning back in his chair. "What happened here, Zara? I've heard bits and pieces of your history, but it's clear there's so much more to it. What did the men of Arendor do that was so terrible?" Zara hesitated for a moment, then sat down across from him, her expression serious. "It was a long time ago, centuries before I was born, but the stories are passed down through every generation. Back then, Arendor was a different place. Men and women lived together, but the society was patriarchal. The men controlled everything: the government, the military, even the technology. Women were seen as secondary, subservient. But there was resistance, and over time it grew. Women began to rise up, demanding equality, freedom. It led to war, a bloody, brutal war that nearly destroyed the planet." Alex listened intently, trying to imagine the society Zara described. It was so different from the Arendor he knew now, a place where women held all the power, where men had been erased from the equation entirely. "In the end," Zara continued, "the women won. Queen Elara's ancestor led the revolution. She overthrew the male leaders, dismantled their power structures, and banished men from the planet entirely. Since then, we've lived in peace, without the violence and corruption that men brought with them. But that peace came at a cost. We lost half of our population. And the fear of men coming back, of history repeating itself, has shaped everything we are." Alex let out a slow breath, the weight of her words sinking in. "I can see why they don't trust me," he said quietly. "But I'm not those men, Zara, and I don't want to be part of their legacy." Zara's eyes softened. "I know that. But convincing the others, it won't be easy, especially with Neres breathing down our necks." At the mention of Neres, Alex felt a chill run down his spine. Neres was one of Queen Elara's most trusted advisors, a staunch traditionalist who had been vocal in her opposition to Alex from the moment he arrived. She was the embodiment of the fear that still gripped Arendor, and she wielded her influence with an iron fist. Her distrust of Alex was palpable, and she had made it clear that she would do whatever it took to protect her people from what she saw as a threat. "We're making progress," Zara said, pulling Alex from his thoughts. "But Neres won't stop until she's convinced Elara that you're too dangerous to keep around. And if Elara listens to her," she didn't finish the sentence, but Alex didn't need her to. He knew what would happen. "Then I need to convince Elara that I'm not a danger," Alex said, determination hardening his voice. "And I need to show the rest of Arendor that men can be more than the monsters from their past." Zara gave him a long, searching look. "That's a tall order, Alex. But if anyone can do it, maybe it's you." Convincing Queen Elara, however, would be no easy feat. The queen was a woman of immense power and intelligence, but she was also fiercely protective of her people and their way of life. She ruled with a combination of wisdom and caution, always weighing the risks and benefits of every decision. And while she had allowed Alex to continue his work under Zara's supervision, her wariness of him had never fully subsided. It was on the third week of his collaboration with Zara that Elara summoned Alex to her private chambers. The summons had come early in the morning, delivered by one of her personal guards, a stern woman named Althea, whose expression betrayed no hint of the queen's intentions. As Alex followed Althea through the labyrinthine corridors of the royal complex, his mind raced with possibilities. Had Neres convinced Elara to exile him? Was this the end of his time on Arendor? Or had Elara seen the results of his work with Zara and decided to give him a chance? The uncertainty gnawed at him, but he forced himself to stay calm, to approach this meeting with the same level-headedness that had guided him through countless challenges in the past. When they reached the queen's chambers, Althea stopped and gestured for Alex to enter. He took a deep breath and stepped inside. The room was bathed in soft, natural light, with high, arched windows that overlooked the glittering city of Arendor beyond. The walls were adorned with intricate carvings, depicting scenes of the planet's history, its ancient battles, its victories, and the rise of its queens. At the center of the room, seated on a simple yet elegant throne, was Queen Elara. She looked as regal and composed as ever, her violet eyes sharp and unreadable as they settled on Alex. Her long, dark blue hair was braided intricately, and she wore a flowing gown that shimmered in the light, adorned with symbols of her power and authority. Yet there was something different in her demeanor and intensity, a weight of contemplation that had not been there before. "Alex of Earth," she said, her voice smooth but laced with tension. "I've been watching your progress." Alex inclined his head respectfully. "Your Majesty." Elara studied him for a long moment, her gaze unwavering. "You've made impressive strides with Zara on the energy project. Our systems are stabilizing. The threat of collapse is no longer imminent, thanks to your efforts." "I'm glad I could help," Alex replied, keeping his tone measured. He knew there was more to this meeting than a simple acknowledgement of his work. Elara rose from her throne and moved to the window, her back to Alex as she gazed out over the city. "But that's not why I've called you here." Alex's pulse quickened. "What is it then?" Elara was silent for a moment, her hands clasped behind her back. When she finally spoke, her voice was quieter, almost thoughtful. "You've caused quite a stir among my people, Alex. There are those who see the value in what you've brought to us, your knowledge, your skills. But there are many more who see you as a threat, a relic of a past we've worked so hard to bury." Alex remained still, listening intently. "I've ruled Arendor for many years," Elara continued, "and I've always believed that the safety and stability of my people must come before all else. That is why, when you first arrived, I considered having you executed or exiled. I could not risk the disruption you might bring." She turned to face him, her eyes sharp and piercing. "But now, I am no longer sure. You are not like the men from our past. You have shown restraint, intelligence, and a genuine desire to help. You have proven yourself in ways I did not expect." Alex's heart pounded in his chest. Was this it? Was this the moment he had been waiting for? "But," Elara said, her voice firm once more, "there are forces at work here that go beyond my personal feelings. Neres and the traditionalists believe that you are a danger. And they are gaining support. Even some of my closest advisors are beginning to question whether allowing you to remain here is worth the risk." Alex swallowed, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on him. "I don't want to disrupt your society, your Majesty," he said carefully. "But I believe that my presence here could be an opportunity not just for technological progress, but for healing. I'm not asking you to change your entire way of life. I'm only asking for the chance to show that men and women can work together for the betterment of both." Elara's expression softened, just a fraction. "You speak with conviction, Alex, and I can see that your intentions are genuine, but words alone will not be enough to sway those who are set in their ways." She moved closer, her gaze never leaving his. "If you want to stay here, if you want to change their minds, you will need to prove yourself in ways that go beyond technology. You will need to show them that you are not a threat, that you can be trusted." Alex nodded, determination hardening in his chest. "I'm ready to do whatever it takes." Elara studied him for another long moment, then finally nodded. "Very well. You will continue your work with Zara. But be warned, Alex, this is your final chance. If you falter, If you give the traditionalists any reason to doubt your intentions, I will not be able to protect you." "I understand," Alex said, his voice steady. "I won't let you down." Ilara held his gaze for a moment longer, then turned away. "You are dismissed." Alex bowed slightly and left the room, his mind racing. The path before him was treacherous, but for the first time since he had arrived on Arendor, he felt a glimmer of hope. Queen Ilara had not condemned him, and that, at least, was a start. A growing alliance. In the days that followed, Alex threw himself even more fully into his work. He and Zara refined their designs for the solar energy system, each breakthrough bringing them closer to a sustainable, long-term solution for Arendor's power needs. Their collaboration had become seamless, a dance of ideas and innovations that flowed effortlessly between them. But outside the lab, the tension between the traditionalists and the more progressive members of Arendorian society continued to grow. The traditionalists, led by Nerys, were becoming more vocal in their opposition to Alex's presence. They held secret meetings, stirring up fear and resentment among those who still believed that men could bring nothing but chaos and destruction. Zara, however, refused to be intimidated. She stood by Alex, defending his contributions and challenging the narrative that men were inherently dangerous. Her courage inspired others, and slowly more women began to question the old beliefs. One evening, after a particularly intense session of work, Zara and Alex found themselves alone on the rooftop of the research facility, looking out over the glowing city below. The air was cool, and the twin suns had set, leaving the sky a deep shade of purple, dotted with unfamiliar stars. "I've been thinking," Zara said, breaking the comfortable silence between them. "About what Ilara said, about trust." Alex glanced at her, intrigued. "What about it?" Zara hesitated for a moment, then turned to face him, her expression serious. "We've been focused on the technology, on fixing the energy grid. But maybe that's not enough. Maybe we need to show people that men and women can work together in ways that go beyond just solving problems." Alex frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" Zara's gaze softened. "I mean, maybe it's time we show them that men and women can build something real together. Something based on respect, on partnership." Alex's heart skipped a beat as he realized what she was implying. "Zara." She smiled faintly, her eyes warm. "I'm not saying it'll be easy, but I think we could change things, Alex. Not just with technology, but with us." For a moment, Alex was speechless. The weight of her words, the significance of what she was suggesting, hit him like a tidal wave. She was right. Their relationship, both professional and personal, was the key to breaking down the barriers that had been built over centuries. If they could show the people of Arendor that men and women could work together, trust each other, and even care for each other, it might just be enough to sway the tide. "Are you sure?" Alex asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Zara met his gaze, her expression unwavering. "I've never been more sure of anything." As they stood together on the rooftop, the night stretching out before them, Alex felt a surge of hope. For the first time since he had arrived on Arendor, he didn't feel like an outsider. He felt like he was part of something bigger, something that could change not just his fate, but the fate of an entire planet. But even as the bond between him and Zara grew stronger, he knew that the challenges ahead were greater than ever. The traditionalists were not backing down, and Nerys would stop at nothing to see him gone. The path to trust, to acceptance, would be long and difficult. But with Zara by his side, Alex was ready to face whatever came next. Together, they would challenge the fear that had defined Arendor for centuries. Together, they would show that trust, real, genuine trust, was possible, even between those who had been enemies for so long. And in that trust, they would find the key to a future that was brighter than either of them had ever imagined. Sunudidin. The tension in the air was thick, almost suffocating. Alex could feel it every time he walked through the corridors of the palace, every time he entered a room, every time his eyes met the cold, skeptical gazes of the women who still saw him as a threat. Despite his progress with Zara and the strides they had made in stabilizing Arendor's energy grid, the undercurrent of suspicion ran deep. In the days that followed Alex's private audience with Queen Ilara, the traditionalists, led by the fiercely determined Nerys, had grown bolder in their opposition. Whispers of discontent had turned into murmurs of rebellion, and it was clear that Nerys was rallying her forces. The council meetings had become more heated, with arguments erupting between those who saw Alex's contributions as valuable and those who believed he was a dangerous anomaly. But it wasn't just political opposition that worried Alex. There was something darker brewing beneath the surface, a sense of desperation from the traditionalists, as if they knew their time was running out. And when people felt cornered, they often became reckless. It was late in the evening when Zara came to him, her expression unusually grim. She had always been a source of calm and strength, her rebellious nature tempered by her logical mind, but tonight there was a shadow in her eyes that Alex had never seen before. "They're meeting tonight," she said quietly, closing the door to the small workshop they had been using for their research. "Neris and the traditionalists. They've been planning something, Alex. Something dangerous." Alex frowned, leaning back from the console where he had been running diagnostics on their latest energy models. "What do you mean? What are they planning?" Zara moved to stand next to him, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, her jaw set. "I don't know the details yet, but I've heard enough to know that they're not just talking about political opposition anymore. They want to remove you permanently." A cold shiver ran down Alex's spine. He had expected resistance, even sabotage, but this was something else. "You think they're planning to kill me?" Zara's eyes darkened, and she gave a curt nod. "They see you as a threat to everything they've built, to the very fabric of our society. And Neris, she's never been one to back down from a fight. If she believes removing you is the only way to preserve the old ways, she'll do it." Alex felt his stomach twist with a mixture of fear and frustration. He had known from the start that his presence on Arendor was precarious, but he hadn't realized just how far the traditionalists would go to protect their beliefs. "What about Queen Alara?" Alex asked, his voice tense. "She's already given me her word that I could stay as long as I continue to help." Zara sighed, pacing the room. "Alara is torn. She sees the value in what you've done, but Neris has significant influence in the council. The Queen can't act too aggressively against the traditionalists without risking a full-scale revolt. She's balancing on a knife's edge, Alex, and I'm afraid if Neris pushes hard enough, Alara may not be able to protect you." Alex leaned against the wall, feeling the weight of the situation settle heavily on his shoulders. "So what do we do?" Zara stopped pacing and looked at him, her expression softening. "We need to be smarter than them. We need to show Arendor that the future we're building, the future we're offering, isn't a threat. It's an opportunity. We need to show them that change doesn't mean chaos." Alex nodded, though a part of him remained uncertain. "And how do we do that when half the planet wants me dead?" Zara's eyes flashed with determination. "We start by stopping whatever Neris is planning. If she succeeds, there won't be any chance for progress. She'll plunge us back into the Dark Ages." The secret meeting. Later that night, Zara and Alex made their way through the twisting corridors of the palace, their footsteps muffled by the soft, luminous moss that lined the floors. The air was thick with the hum of energy grids and distant machinery, but the palace itself was eerily quiet. It was as though the building itself held its breath, waiting for something to break the fragile peace. Zara led Alex to a hidden passageway near the heart of the palace, one that few people knew about. She had discovered it years ago during her rebellious explorations of the royal complex, and it had since become her secret route to avoid the watchful eyes of the council. Tonight it would serve a more dangerous purpose. "They'll be meeting in the lower chambers," Zara whispered as they slipped into the narrow passage. "It's where the traditionalists gather when they don't want the Queen or her more progressive allies knowing what they're up to." Alex followed her through the dimly lit corridor, his heart pounding in his chest. He had no idea what they were walking into, but the stakes had never felt higher. If Neris and her faction succeeded in their plans, it wouldn't just be his life on the line, it would be the future of Arendor. They reached the end of the passageway, where a small opening overlooked the lower chambers. Zara motioned for Alex to be silent as they crouched down, peering through the narrow slit into the room below. It was a large, dimly lit space, filled with intricate carvings and ancient symbols etched into the walls. At the center stood a group of women, all dressed in the dark, ceremonial robes of the Traditionalist Council. Neris stood at the front, her tall, imposing figure illuminated by the faint glow of the torches that lined the chamber. "We can no longer wait," Neris was saying, her voice cold and commanding. "Alex of Earth has already ingratiated himself with Queen Alara, and the people are beginning to see him as something other than the threat he truly is. We cannot allow this to continue." One of the other women, a stern-faced elder with silver hair, stepped forward. "What do you propose, Neres? The queen has given him her protection, and there are many who believe in his contributions." Neres's expression hardened. "The queen is weak. She's been swayed by Zara and the others who see only what they wish to see, a man who brings knowledge, innovation. But I see the truth. Alex's presence here is a rot. He represents everything that destroyed our world once before. If we do not act now, we risk losing everything we've built." There were murmurs of agreement from several of the women, and Neres continued, her voice gaining strength. "We must remove him. Quietly, decisively. If we wait for the queen to act, it will be too late. We must act now for the good of Arendor." Alex's blood ran cold. He had expected resistance, but hearing Neres speak with such conviction, such hatred, made the danger feel all too real. "They're planning to kill you," Zara whispered, her voice tight with fear. "We need to get out of here." But before they could move, Neres's voice rang out again. "Our best chance will be during the solar grid activation ceremony. The entire city will be gathered. It will look like an accident. No one will suspect a thing." Alex felt his stomach drop. The solar grid activation ceremony. The culmination of all their work. It was supposed to be a moment of triumph, a symbol of the future he and Zara were building together. And now it was the moment Neres had chosen to end his life. Zara's hand tightened on his arm. "We can't let them do this." The next day, Zara and Alex worked in a tense silence, preparing for the solar grid activation ceremony. The grand event was set to take place in the city's central square, a sprawling space surrounded by towering structures of silver and glass, where the citizens of Arendor would gather to witness the unveiling of the new energy system. It was supposed to be a celebration, a moment of unity and progress. But now, it felt like the calm before the storm. Zara had briefed Alex on the plan they would follow to counter Neres's plot, but the odds were stacked against them. The traditionalists had the element of surprise on their side, and the public trust in Alex was still fragile. If something went wrong, if the ceremony devolved into chaos, Neres would use it as proof that Alex was a danger, and the people would turn against him. As the suns began to set, casting the city in a golden glow, Alex and Zara stood on the platform in the central square, surrounded by the gleaming machinery of the solar energy grid they had worked so hard to create. Thousands of women filled the square, their faces expectant, curious, and more than anything wary. It was clear that many of them still weren't sure what to make of Alex, the man who had come to their world and upended their way of life. Queen Alara stood at the front of the crowd, her expression calm but watchful. Alex could sense her inner turmoil, her struggle to balance the old ways with the new. She had given him her protection, but he knew that her patience was wearing thin. Tonight would be the test. As the ceremony began, Zara took the stage to address the crowd, her voice ringing out with a clear, confident tone. She spoke of the progress they had made, of the new energy system that would bring stability and prosperity to Arendor for generations to come. Her words were met with polite applause, but Alex could feel the tension in the air, the unspoken fear that still gripped the hearts of the people. And then, it was his turn. Alex stepped forward, his heart pounding in his chest. He had prepared a speech, but as he stood before the crowd, he realized that words alone wouldn't be enough to sway them. He needed to show them something real, something that would prove that he wasn't the threat they believed him to be. People of Arendor. He began, his voice steady but firm. "I know that my presence here has caused fear, doubt, and uncertainty. I know that for centuries men have been seen as the enemy, as a danger to the peace and harmony you have worked so hard to build. But I stand before you today not as a threat, but as a partner, a collaborator, someone who believes in the future we can build together." There was a ripple of murmurs through the crowd, but Alex pressed on. "I have seen your world, your society, and I am in awe of what you've accomplished. But I believe that we can do even more together. Men and women, working side by side, can achieve things that neither of us could do alone. The energy grid we are unveiling today is just the beginning. It is a symbol of what we can accomplish when we combine our strengths, our knowledge, and our hope for a better future." For a moment, there was silence. The crowd seemed to hold its breath, waiting. And then, with a flick of a switch, Zara activated the solar grid. The machinery hummed to life, sending waves of energy through the city. The sky above them lit up with a brilliant, golden light as the twin suns' energy was harnessed and distributed across the entire city. The crowd gasped, their faces bathed in the warm glow of the new power source. It was beautiful, awe-inspiring, and for a brief moment, there was a sense of unity in the air, a shared vision of what could be. But the moment was short-lived. Out of the corner of his eye, Alex saw movement figures darting through the crowd, heading straight for the platform. His heart raced as he realized what was happening. Nereis' plan was unfolding. "Zara!" Alex shouted, but it was too late. A group of traditionalists stormed the stage, weapons drawn. The crowd erupted into chaos as the attackers charged toward Alex, their faces twisted with determination and hatred. Everything happened in a blur. Zara leapt into action, fighting off the attackers with the grace and precision of a trained warrior. But there were too many of them, and the stage was quickly overrun. Alex fought to defend himself, using the tools and machinery around him to fend off the attackers. But as he struggled, he realized that this wasn't just about him anymore. It was about the future of Arendor. If the traditionalists succeeded in killing him, they would plunge the planet back into a cycle of fear and isolation. In the midst of the chaos, Alex saw Nereis at the edge of the stage, her face twisted with a cold, triumphant smile. She raised her hand, signaling to one of her followers, a woman holding a small, glowing device that pulsed with dangerous energy. They were going to sabotage the grid. If they succeeded, it would cause a massive explosion, destroying the entire city and ensuring that Alex's presence would forever be remembered as a disaster. "No," Alex shouted, lunging toward the device. But before he could reach it, Zara intercepted the woman, grappling with her in a fierce struggle. The two women fought for control of the device, their movements a blur of speed and precision. For a moment it seemed as though Zara had the upper hand. She disarmed the attacker and grabbed the device, but just as she did, a bright flash of energy erupted from the stage. The machinery that powered the solar grid began to overload, sending sparks flying into the air. Alex's heart pounded in his chest as he realized what was happening. The grid was going to explode. They had seconds to stop it. Without thinking, he rushed to the control panel, his fingers flying over the controls as he tried to shut down the system. The energy readings spiked, and the machinery groaned under the strain. "Zara, get out of here," Alex shouted, his voice hoarse with urgency. "I need to shut it down." But Zara didn't move. She stood her ground, fighting off the last of the attackers as Alex worked frantically to stabilize the grid. The seconds stretched into what felt like hours as Alex struggled to bring the system back under control. Sweat poured down his face, and his hands trembled with the weight of the responsibility he carried. If he failed, the entire city, no, the entire planet would be plunged into chaos. Finally, with a final flick of the controls, the system stabilized. The lights above them dimmed slightly, and the hum of the machinery returned to a steady, gentle pulse. It was over. The attackers had been subdued, and the grid had been saved. But the battle for Arendor's future was far from finished. The crowd in the square had scattered in the chaos, but Queen Alara remained, her face a mask of barely restrained fury. Nereis, bruised and defeated, was dragged before the queen by the royal guards, her head bowed in shame. Alara's eyes flashed with cold fire as she looked down at her once trusted advisor. "You have betrayed me," Nereis the queen said, her voice icy. "You have betrayed your people." Nereis said nothing, her jaw clenched in defiance. Alex stood at the edge of the stage, his heart still pounding in his chest as he watched the scene unfold. He had come so close to losing everything: his life, his work, and the fragile hope he had begun to build with Zara. But as Alara turned her gaze to him, there was something new in her eyes, something that had not been there before. Respect. "Alex of Earth," she said, her voice steady, "you have proven yourself today. You have saved this city, and in doing so, you have shown that true trust is possible." Alex bowed his head, feeling a wave of relief wash over him. Alara's gaze softened slightly as she looked at Zara, who stood beside Alex, her face streaked with sweat and grime from the battle. "And you, Zara, have shown incredible courage. Your belief in a future built on collaboration has brought us to this moment." Zara nodded, her expression solemn but determined. Alara turned to the crowd, her voice ringing out across the square. "Let this day be a turning point for Arendor, We have seen the dangers of holding on to the past, of clinging to fear. But we have also seen the power of hope, of trust, and of partnership. The future we build will be one of unity, not division. The crowd, still shaken but slowly gathering again, began to murmur in agreement. For the first time since he had arrived on Arendor, Alex felt a glimmer of true hope. The battle for trust was not over, but they had taken the first step toward a new future, one where fear no longer dictated their lives, and where men and women could work together to build something greater than either could achieve alone. As the night sky shimmered above them, filled with the light of distant stars, Alex knew that the real challenge was still ahead. But with Zara by his side and the support of Queen Alara, he was ready to face whatever came next. Together, they would change Arendor, and perhaps, in time, they would change the galaxy. The city was quieter now. The chaos of the earlier attack had given way to an uneasy calm, as the people of Arendor processed the events that had unfolded during the solar grid ceremony. Alex stood on the balcony of Zara's private quarters, overlooking the shimmering skyline of the capital, his mind racing with everything that had transpired. He had come to Arendor as an unintentional intruder, a stranger from another world, and in the span of mere weeks, his presence had upended centuries of tradition and fear. He had faced opposition, hatred, and even an assassination attempt, yet somehow he had survived. More than that, he had begun to change the way people saw him, saw men. But as he stood there, staring at the twin moons hanging low in the sky, he couldn't help but feel the weight of what was still to come. The battle for Arendor's future wasn't over. Nerys had been defeated, but the deep-seated fear and prejudice that she represented were still alive in the hearts of many. It would take time, perhaps years, for true change to take root. And in that time, Alex would need to prove, over and over again, that he was not the enemy they had been taught to fear. A soft rustle behind him broke his reverie. He turned to see Zara stepping out onto the balcony, her silhouette bathed in the soft glow of the moons. She had changed out of the battle-worn clothes she'd worn earlier into something simpler and elegant, flowing gown that caught the light as she moved. Her long, dark hair cascaded over her shoulders, and her blue eyes, usually so sharp and focused, now held a softness that Alex hadn't seen before. For a moment they simply looked at each other, the tension of the past days still hanging between them like an invisible thread. Then, slowly, Zara moved to stand beside him, her gaze sweeping over the city before settling on him. "Are you okay?" she asked quietly, her voice filled with concern. Alex nodded, though he wasn't sure if it was entirely true. "I think so. It's just a lot to take in." Zara smiled softly, a wistful look crossing her face. "You've been through more than anyone could have expected, and yet here you are still standing." Alex let out a breath, running a hand through his hair. "Barely. If it weren't for you, I don't know if I'd even be alive right now." Zara shook her head, her eyes flashing with determination. "You saved us today, Alex. You stopped Nerys, you stabilized the grid, you gave the people a glimpse of a future they didn't think was possible. That's not something many could have done." For a moment there was silence between them, the quiet night enveloping them in its warmth. Alex turned back to the view, his mind still racing, though a new thought had begun to emerge, one that had been quietly growing for some time now. "It's not just about saving the grid," Zara Alex said softly, his voice tinged with something deeper. "It's about what we've built together, you and me. I've never had this kind of connection with anyone before. You've made me see the world, your world, through different eyes." Zara's expression shifted, something unspoken passing between them. She stepped closer, her shoulder brushing against his. When she spoke, her voice was low and tentative, as if she was revealing something that had been hidden for too long. "I've always been a rebel, Alex. Even before you came here, I questioned things, traditions, rules, expectations. But you," she paused, her gaze drifting to the stars. "You've made me see that there's more to life than just challenging the system. You've shown me that change isn't something to be feared, it's something to be embraced." Alex turned toward her, his heart pounding in his chest. "Zara, I..." But before he could finish, Zara closed the distance between them, her hand resting gently on his arm. Her touch was warm, and the electricity between them crackled in the air, as if the connection they had been dancing around for so long was finally coming to the surface. "I never thought I'd meet someone like you," she said softly, her eyes searching his. "You're different from anyone I've ever known, strong but kind, brave but humble. and more than that she hesitated for a moment, then let out a small, almost nervous laugh. "You make me want things I didn't even know I could want." Alex's breath hitched, his heart racing as the meaning behind her words became clear. The tension between them, the unspoken feelings that had simmered beneath the surface for so long, were finally breaking free. "Zara," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I feel the same. From the moment I met you, I knew there was something different about you. You challenged me, pushed me to be better, to think differently. And now, I can't imagine my life without you." Zara's eyes softened, her lips curving into a small smile. "Then, don't imagine it without me." And with that, she leaned in, closing the final gap between them. Their lips met in a soft, tentative kiss, the weight of everything that had come before, every argument, every moment of doubt, every triumph melting away in the warmth of their embrace. For a long moment, they simply stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, the night sky stretching out endlessly above them. It was a moment of pure connection, a bond forged not just through their shared experiences, but through the quiet, unspoken understanding that they were no longer just allies or even friends, they were something more. When they finally pulled apart, Zara's eyes were filled with a mixture of wonder and amusement. She looked at Alex, a mischievous glint in her eye, and said, "Actually, I wonder what the world is like in the human reproductive system outside of technology." Alex blinked, taken aback by her sudden question. For a moment he wasn't sure if she was serious, but the playful smirk on her lips told him she was teasing him, though perhaps not entirely. "Well," Alex said, his voice low and teasing, "I suppose there's only one way to find out." Zara's smirk deepened, and before Alex could say another word, she pulled him back into her arms, her lips finding his once more. This kiss was different, deeper, more urgent, filled with the promise of what was to come. They made their way inside, the door to Zara's quarters sliding shut behind them, sealing them off from the world outside. For the first time since Alex had arrived on Arendor, there was no threat looming over them, no political machinations to worry about, no fear of what might happen next. It was just the two of them, two people who had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances, drawn together by something neither of them could fully explain. Zara led Alex to her bed, her movements slow and deliberate, as if savoring every moment. The soft glow of the city lights filtered through the windows, casting long shadows across the room. The air was thick with anticipation, their breathing the only sound in the quiet night. As they undressed, there was a sense of wonder in the air, as if they were both discovering something new and sacred. Zara's touch was soft, yet firm, her hands exploring the planes of Alex's body with a mix of curiosity and desire. Alex responded in kind, his fingers tracing the contours of her skin, marveling at the strength and grace that lay beneath. Their bodies moved together in perfect harmony, the connection between them deepening with every kiss, every touch. There was no rush, no urgency, just the quiet, intimate understanding that this moment was theirs alone. For Zara, it was an experience unlike anything she had ever known. Arendor's society had long since distanced itself from the traditional methods of reproduction, relying instead on advanced technology to ensure the continuation of their species. But with Alex, this was different. This was personal, raw, and real. She had always been curious about what it would be like, what it would feel like to experience the human reproductive system in its purest, most natural form. And now, with Alex, she was discovering the answer. It was more than just physical, it was emotional, spiritual, a connection that went beyond mere biology. As the night wore on, they lost themselves in each other, their movements slow and unhurried, savoring every moment of this new and beautiful connection. There was no need for words, everything they needed to say was expressed in the way their bodies moved together, in the soft sighs and whispered breaths that filled the air. Eventually, they lay together, their bodies entwined, the cool night air brushing against their skin. Zara rested her head on Alex's chest, her fingers tracing lazy circles on his arm as they basked in the afterglow of their shared intimacy. "I've never felt like this before," Zara murmured, her voice soft and content. "I never thought I could." Alex smiled, pressing a gentle kiss to the top of her head. "Neither did I. But I'm glad we found this together." Zara smiled, her eyes fluttering closed as sleep began to pull her under. "Together," she echoed, her voice barely a whisper. As Alex held her close, he couldn't help but feel a deep sense of peace settle over him. The future was still uncertain, and the challenges ahead were great, but in this moment, with Zara in his arms, he knew that they could face whatever came next together. And as the first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon, casting a soft, golden glow across the city of Arendor, Alex knew that this was just the beginning. The beginning of a new chapter, not just for him and Zara, but for the entire planet. Together they would build a future where fear and prejudice no longer held sway, where men and women could stand as equals, partners in the creation of a better world. And in that future they would find not only progress and prosperity, but love and trust, the foundations of a new Arendor. For Alex and Zara, the night had been more than just a moment of intimacy. It had been the beginning of something far greater, a bond that would carry them forward into whatever challenges awaited them. And as the new day dawned, Alex couldn't help but feel that they were ready to face it, hand in hand together. The new dawn of Arendor had begun.